Good evening, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Recreation and Parks Commission. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Alex Farfan,
Present.
Commissioner Rick Pierce,
Present.
Commissioner Dave Wu, absent. Vice Chair Lee Davis,
Present.
Chairperson Bob Moda.
I'm here. Presentations tonight. Campus El Segundo project update.
Thank you very much. Well, we're happy to announce that Campus El Segundo is officially open. Reopen. We opened the field back up to our user groups on Tuesday, October 10th. It was completed by the contractor on Friday the 6th, and then Joseph and the parks crew went in on that Monday and tried to spruce it up as much as possible by replanting some plants, tightening up the landscaping, power washing all the bubble gum off of the steps, making sure the restrooms were ready and things like that. So I just wanted to update everybody that we are fully open. The hours have not changed. We are open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. on the weekdays and 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on the weekends. AYSO had been utilizing some of the outfield space at George Brett Field, Richmond Field, the softball field, and Stevenson, which was atypical. Typically, softball field and Stevenson are reserved for softball and baseball only. So I wanted to thank the groups for being accommodating for that. And we moved them back to Campus El Segundo as soon as we could once it was open. So I wanted to also thank AYSO for being flexible with their schedules this year. I know that they also were able to utilize the Raytheon field space for one of their weekends in October as well. So the user groups have been very patient, and we appreciate that. So I've heard nothing but good things about the new field. The new field now has permanent lines for multi-sports. So as you know, we before had only the white large soccer field permanently overlaid into the field, and the parks crew was painting many lines for the short-sighted soccer games, for the U10 AYSO group, for lacrosse and other sports. So we were able to work pretty closely with lacrosse and AYSO to make sure that our plans and specs were absolutely perfect before laying down permanent lines. So we have red lines out there that are lacrosse on both fields, and we have black lines on both fields. One field is the 7-versus-7 adult soccer lines, and the other field is black lines for the U10 AYSO groups. Both playing east to west, so they're playing width-wise. So there's 2 fields per one large field. And let's see, what else were we were able to find additional space to widen one of the fields. So I think it's the east field is a little bit wider than it was. So one field is 65 yards by 100 yards, which is what we had on both fields prior to. The east field is now 70 yards wide, so it's actually better for the older age soccer players, making a wider field. So we feel that we've upgraded a little bit in those aspects, and so far so good. The user groups are happy. One thing that has come up is a lot of conversation about enforcing the rules and the policies in terms of food and drink, and also access in and out of the facility. There's been some email conversations going on. Our city council has brought it up and been brought into the conversation. And what we think might be a good step is to get with the Youth Sports Council, maybe a couple of the other users, and talk about, are there any policies or rules that we need to either put in place or change to make sure that we're preserving this asset for as long as we possibly can? But also the second step to that would be talking about how can our user groups help us in disseminating that information and enforcing those rules and policies. So making sure that, you know, the parents of the participants are very well aware of what is or isn't allowed in terms of, well, really we're water only on the turf, and, you know, no sunflower seeds, no Gatorade, other types of food, certain types of chairs, canopies, things like that. So we will reconvene that, definitely using the Youth Sports Council to do that. So I'd love to, you know, hear any of your initial feedback on that before we move forward.
One thing on that, also, when it goes to the Youth Sports Council, are we going to discuss usage also? People that aren't supposed to be out there at certain times, will we make sure that happens?
Right. And
Okay.
I think that there's some things that we can do. We'll definitely analyze. I think it's been a good amount of time to take a look back at that drop-in program from 10 a.m. to 2, where we're collecting a drop-in fee, taking a look at, you know, how many people are really visiting during that time, how much money is coming in, and how much are we spending on staffing that, because I know that we are not breaking even. I know that right off the bat. So we'll want to take a look at that and see if that's something that we want to adjust, and how we might do that.
I think I'm interested in that also, but the groups that are coming in and trying to take over field space, that's what I was
Right.
more interested in.
That as
also.
well.
Thank you. Okay, that being it on the presentations, move to public communications related to commission business only, and that is within the subject matter under the jurisdiction of the commission. Anyone interested? Step up to the microphone, please. State your name.
I am Allison Stoser, and I live in El Segundo. And good evening, council members. As you all know, that Three Musketeers started in 1987 to improve El Segundo's environment. When the original Three Musketeers formally closed in April, the youth managers, including myself, took the original Three Musketeers and purchased items that we could from them and made our own organization called Three Musketeers The Next Generation, and we then partnered with the city of the Recreation Department. Three Musketeers and the Next Generation invite you to provide tender, loving care for trees on Memory Row, which is on Imperial Avenue. This will be this Saturday, October 21st, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., and this event will be called Make a Difference Day. It's one of our second biggest events. We will mulch the trees on Memory Row, and we are hoping for at least 100 volunteers to show up. So we hope that you can come with your family and friends and coworkers to participate in this event. And if you would like more information, you can check out the website, threemusketeers.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any others? Okay, seeing none, we will close public communications. Consent calendar. Approval of the minutes of the Recreation and Parks Commission regular meeting of September 20th, 2017.
I had one comment. I believe on page 4, as we were handed to us, under reports of subcommittee, aquatic subcommittee, apparently I didn't speak clearly at the last meeting, and they have Skinsler. That would be Ginsler.
I'll move approval with the one change.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
I abstained because I
Okay,
wasn't
so
here.
I didn't hear him.
That's okay.
4-0 and an abstention.
Great. It's going to be one of those meetings.
Thanks, Rick. No unfinished business. New business. Consideration and possible action related to establishing a process for identifying and prioritizing future capital improvement projects in parks and recreation facilities. Couple of recommendations. Discuss possible options for establishing a process for identifying and prioritizing future capital improvement projects, or alternatively, discuss and take other action related to this item. Meredith?
Thank you very much. This is a very exciting item. Very excited to talk about this. Really great news for us is that the City Council has allocated a certain amount of money to Parks and Recreation upgrades and facilities. Now, $200,000, it's a good start. But you have the report in front of you. Like I said, the City Council adopted their budget and allocated $200,000 from the general fund to be sort of placed in a parking lot, so to speak, deferred to the Recreation and Parks Commission to talk about what improvements or upgrades or maintenance projects are needed, most needed this fiscal year for that $200,000. A couple additional projects that they have allocated additional money to is the hockey rink repairs, $80,000 has been estimated for that project. Those funds will be coming from what we call the Developer Impact Fund. And basically when a new development comes into town, there are certain fees that they pay to the city, and a certain portion of those get allocated to different services within the city, so police department, fire services, library, and in Parks and Recreation. So currently, our fund balance is about $185,000. Those funds roll over from year to year, so if they're not spent this fiscal year, they do not go away. They're for a specific purpose, and that's basically to mitigate impact to services. So the idea is that a new development might come in, such as D.R. Horton. There's more people to serve, therefore we may need to upgrade certain facilities or add park or recreation amenities to service the impact of whatever development it is. D.R. Horton's percentage towards recreation and parks was a little over $100,000. So a big chunk of what our balance is currently came from D.R. Horton.
Should I hold questions to the end?
You can ask a question, sure.
Is that fund of money specifically for recreation parks only, or can it also be used for streets and sidewalks and?
This is specifically for Parks and
So
Recreation.
parks and rec, and
Right.
it is by code. It's only allowed to use by that, or that's just in practice
It is
by code.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So every year, the Public Works Department during the budget process goes through a CPAC process, so a capital improvement project advisory committee gets together, and staff generally presents projects to that, and then that advisory committee, which is made up of residents, rank the projects, and those ranked projects get presented to City Council during the budget process, and the City Council determines how much funds are available to allocate to capital projects. Now, what I've found over the years is that, and you have the ranking in front of you, you can see the type of criteria that they use to rank, but a lot of times the Parks and Recreation programs or projects really don't float to the top because we're competing with other projects such as water and sewer projects, street repairs, seismic retrofits to fire station doors, things like that that are more health and safety related that tend to float to the top of the list. And our recreation projects, unfortunately, usually don't make it, at least not a lot of them make it to the top to get funded. So one of the things that I stressed this year during the budget process with the City Council is how, that specific example, and how it would be nice to have a little bit of money specifically for recreation and parks facilities. So I think we're moving in the right direction. $200,000, we'll see this year how far it gets us. We know that there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of at Recreation Park and our other parks. But it's definitely a good process to go through, and I'm really excited to sort of see how this all evolves this year and how it works out, and hopefully next year we can go back with some success stories and build on that. So again, we have the hockey rink renovation was one that did rank towards the top and was funded by City Council. Also, floating to the top was the Acacia Park design, not necessarily the construction, because we don't know what the park is going to look like. We also know that the Public Works project currently going on at Acacia Park will take us till about the end of this fiscal year. So hopefully we can use this year to design something for Acacia Park, whether that's a new playground or something bigger. And then next year we'll take that design to city council and with a cost estimate and ask for those funds to be allocated at that time.
But it's not, or I'm asking, is it not your expectation that the money for Acacia Park does not come from something like this, that is separate? Or is that expected to come from these allocations that potentially will continue from council?
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, I think that that one specifically will be in a place, I mean, we don't know how much it's going to cost yet. And we should know before the budget process for the next fiscal year. So I think it'll be up to the city council to decide where that fund is coming from. But if it doesn't get funded, then the park unfortunately won't have a playground. So more to come on that. I think it's more of a timing thing right now that we wanted to make sure that we design it appropriately, because there's a lot of talk out in the community about splash pads. And is Acacia Park a good place for that? We have a pool there. Is the pool, does the pool stay? Does the pool go? There's some opportunity at that park, and we need to explore, I think, what that is.
So for our exercise, either here or in the immediate future, should we keep in mind that we need to potentially reserve funds for that? Because that, I would think, would probably rise somewhere to the top because it's an empty park without it. Should that be a consideration as we go through this, or should we kind of keep that to the side as a separate topic?
I think we keep Acacia Park on the list to prioritize, and I do think that will be at the top. And when we come back maybe the second round and talk about how much funds and what action we actually want to take this year with those funds, that'll kind of come back into play. The way that I look at this exercise is there's a long list that we've been keeping in-house for quite a while. And if we take sort of the dollar amounts away and really just focus on which of these are high priority, whether that's in a year, 2 years, 3 years, we have short-term needs, we have long-term vision, and really go through the exercise of sort of ranking priority, and then come back in and talk about how much funds do we have available and where do we want to spend them this year. Does that make sense?
It does.
I think, though, that my hope would be that we would find some projects for the $200,000 this year, and then request from council what is needed for Acacia Park next fiscal year.
Does the $200,000 allocation, let's hypothetically say that they come back next year and say, here's another $200,000 for the next set of projects. Is it councils, have they expressed any expectation that would be the extent of the allocation for recreation and parks? Or might they be doing some of these through their regular process and then allocating 200 to us? Like, what I'm saying is this completely taking the place of that? Are they now saying we're not doing anything for rec park because this is what you get? Or is this too new to know kind of how
I think
this,
it's a little too
okay.
new to know, and I've been having conversations with Public Works on how to really approach this moving forward, because there is a fine line, like some of the things on the list that you can see are more facility-based, like raising the toilets at the Joslin Center is one of those that's kind of on the fine line of, should that be used as the Recreation and Parks Fund, or is that a general capital project, like a building maintenance kind of project that we should leave to go through that CPAC process? So we're still figuring that out. And I will note, too, that LaFawn Shu is here. He's our city engineer, and I asked him to come to sort of educate the commission on the CPAC process and how they rank things, just to sort of give us a baseline to go off of. I don't think it's exactly 100% how we want to go through the process, but I think we can definitely take pieces of that. So Fawn is here. But just to kind of finish where we are and where I think this conversation tonight should focus on is really talking about how do we want to go about prioritizing. You know, there's definitely different ways to do it. I, in the packet, included one long list, and today provided you another list that, just from my kind of going down the list, placing them in different A, B, C. The C's are sort of the things that are already in progress or already funded that we really don't need to address. The A, high priority, or B, other. I wasn't sure what to call it because I don't think they're low priority or medium priority, but you get what I'm saying. Is that the things, you know, from a staff perspective, and the things just from feedback that we've heard over the years, is, you know, the ones that I think would make the most difference or impact the most people or
So
are
to
the
be
most
clear
needed.
for our massive viewing audience, this is not the Meredith list. This is the staff. This is years of staff work that has led to these lists.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. These have been kept over time, and every year as we go through the CPAC process and the budget process, we sort of add to them. When people come to commission and say, I want a new paddle tennis, I add that to the list. So, you know, or have surveys, or we hear about fencing and shading in the parks, those are added to the list, and that's based on all sorts of feedback. So this was just a cursory view from me, just putting that long list into things maybe to focus on, and obviously I open to discussion on whether or not one belongs in one category or another, but just to sort of make it a little bit more palatable to to go through. So I think tonight, if we want to talk about what's the best, you know, what are the next steps moving forward on how to prioritize the list? Do we do an A group and a B group and focus on the A group? Do we want to do a ranking system? We want to model it after the CPAC and see what's relevant, and, you know, how we want to modify that. So I'd really like to talk about a ranking system, what's important to how to weight the priority of these projects. And then secondarily, you know, if you desire to have some sort of a subcommittee to really work on the nuts and bolts, and then we bring it back to the commission, you know, maybe a subcommittee can come up with that ranking system or a matrix of some sort, and then we can have each individual commissioner kind of do homework and go through it on each project, and we can reconvene and see where everybody's landing and talk about it at that point. I'm certainly open to doing site visits if anybody would like to come and take a look at the facilities and see the condition of them, do tours, lots of things, and definitely want to just kind of open-ended talk about, you know, how do we want to get a recommendation back to City Council in a reasonable amount of time, probably a couple months, if not sooner, about that $200,000 and what we think as a commission, as a body, should be prioritized for this specific year. So, you have some questions, or I can call LaFawn up and he can go through the ranking.
No, I'd like to ask some questions and,
Sure.
and share some experiences.
Perfect.
I know that prioritizing projects like this is something that I, in my work experience all the time. Department of Defense uses something similar. They don't necessarily go through the rating criteria as formally as CPAC has, but that is, I think this is goodness. Establish what your criterion are. These may be aligned with what the needs are for rec and parks, but maybe not. I think a sideboard looking at that might be helpful to us. We've got a couple of projects that are already underway, and personally, I wouldn't want to stop where we're at in moving forward with projects, because we've got the latest great idea to figure out how to rack and stack things. So those things that are through the wickets and moving along, keep them moving along. I don't think we should upset the apple cart relative to that. If I understand right with resources, so there's 200 in the general fund, there's 185,000 as developer impact fund. That would vary from year to year, right? So
Right.
it's larger in some years, smaller in others.
Correct.
And then we've been the beneficiary of some good organizations that help support our activities. And so there are some things that some folks in the community have already expressed a willingness to help support.
True.
So that kind of understanding budgetary should fold into this process, I think. And as you said, your A and B was really your gut feel, having seen this over the years and where you kind of think the lay of the land is.
Right, I think it comes down to sort of needs and wants, right?
Right.
I want a lot of things, but
Yep.
we don't need a lot of things, you know.
Yep.
Anything new, I think one of the things on the B list is a fitness trail at Memory Row, and that was an idea that came to us several years ago by somebody at the time who was involved in the cross-country team at the high school. And I submitted that one to CPAC this year, and it scored very high. But when it was in front of city council, they thought that why add something new when we have a hard time maintaining what we currently have? So that was estimated to be about $50,000 project because a lot of it can be done in-house by our crews. But that's another sort of idea that we have to talk about is maintaining or upgrading or renovating versus adding amenities, and what's where do we find the balance in that?
Right. I look in the CPAC list, and there's a question about return on investment. I'm not sure how that exactly plays in our calculus with all the resources that Rec and Parks has, but it definitely is in there somewhere, right? Let's see. And everything you have in here looks like it's project-based. It's not just, I don't see anything that feels like it's just sustaining infrastructure. Now, some of them do sustain the infrastructure, but they're like projects that have kind of popped out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the regular trimming of trees or squaring away the park.
Right.
These are special projects that will add or change a dimension to something, right,
Exactly.
that way. You have separate resources for that type of activity, the sustainment aspect of things?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions before you wanted to bring someone else? Okay.
I do.
Go ahead, please.
So the hockey rink and Acacia Park is already spent. It's already accounted for. So that is taken off, right? So the 185 minus 130. So do we have 55 left from that?
Yes.
So we have 255.
Correct.
And with no guarantee about the following year, one way or the other, with regard to the developer fees, nor from the city council. So
Right.
at this point, we have 255.
Yes.
Things like kind of what Rick was saying. So things like slurry, redoing the pathways in Library Park. That one doesn't seem like it would be on our list, right? Because that would be I don't know. Like when I was going through this, over the last week or so, like I was making notes like, why is this even on our, So working with the other departments, I think, is a key part of this too. To take off maybe a third of these wouldn't even be part of our consideration set potentially, right?
Well, it depends on where the boundaries are drawn. Right?
Yeah, and we don't
because I don't think the various stakeholders have had that conversation yet, right?
Right.
We're maturing this process as we sit here.
And you're using that as an example, the slurry seal, because it says it's in progress and funded already.
Right.
Okay, so you're using it as an example.
I am,
Okay,
also
great.
because, as an example, and also because it's already funded, I am assuming it's not funded from Rec
Right.
and
That's
Parks.
something that was a
It's-
request from me to Public Works.
Right,
to
right, Public Works.
try to
So
fit into
how
their
many of these-
program.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And
so-
that's what we're still trying to explore too. So I would imagine as well that LaFawn, city engineer, would be part of this process with us to help us sort of navigate that boundary.
My questions are getting ahead of ourselves because we're talking about process tonight, and I'm jumping ahead to ranking and doing all that
Well,
stuff.
that is process.
Hard not to, right?
That is
But
process.
this is new for
Okay.
us, so
Right.
this is kind of exciting for us. We get to make help make decisions here, which is unusual for us, as it shouldn't be. But
Well, and I want to go back to one thing I said earlier, which I would like to find out before we set a process, and that is really about, is this supplanting council's funding these projects? Are they just taking the money that they would have allocated to projects and saying, okay, now, like, they're not going to add anything else? Like, when CPAC comes back next year, are they going to say, well, we don't need to allocate any, we don't need to put the recreation and parks on this list because we gave rec parks 200 this year, and so they're responsible for taking care of those things. I mean, if that's the case, so be it, but that will change, I think, how we go about this.
Yeah, well, it'll have to be a coordinated effort because Public Works needs to plan their work program for the year. And so the way I understand it now is, let's say at the current staffing levels, Public Works can accomplish about $14 million worth of projects a year. So come budget time, we might say to City Council and try to convince them, how about 1 million gets allocated to Parks and Rec, and Recreation Parks Commission can prioritize the projects, and then there'll be 13 million for the CPAC process. And then they fold that together to make sure that Public Works has the capacity to accomplish those projects. That's kind of how I don't think $1 million is the number.
No, that's a
but,
good number.
You
It's
know,
good. I like that.
My,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of how I would see it going. And I think we have to work through the process, show them that we have a good process in place, and be on the same page with Public Works. You know, the Public Works director and I will, and the finance director will come up with some sort of approach to City Council.
Okay, then I think one more. I think I'm good. Thanks.
So let me make an observation, and, you know, seeing what the CPAC has listed for all the stuff, it's very helpful to decision makers to be able to see those right in front of them and saying, this is where those who are more in the know, that deal with this on a daily basis, what they're doing. And I think the process the city's looking at is, City Council's probably saying, our job jar is filled. We don't get to all the things that we want to do. We've allocated some money, and we want the advice of the Recreation and Parks Department to come back and say, this is how we should go off and approach this problem. They may see some things differently and may reprioritize things, but at least they have the voice of the commission and the department to say, okay, some knowledgeable folks really were deliberate about this, and that's what they put in front of us. That's how I see what they're asking for.
Okay. Any more questions for Meredith? Okay, go. You wanna?
Yeah,
Bring up.
I'd like to introduce LaFawn and have him come up, and he administers the CPAC process with the advisory committee, so he's going to just give us a rundown of how they go through the process and the ranking system that they use, and we can take what we want from it.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Nifan Xu. I'm the city engineer. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on how we get to this point. So every year we have the CPAC process, and the CPAC committee does a very good job scoring the project. Problem is with the CPAC process, in fair to all, we come up with this criteria that it's fair for the overall system, but the way it's scored, it doesn't. You know, as Meredith has described, the Parks and Recs is a lot of it's a want. So they don't really flow to the top under this system. So over the years, it's the more health and safety related projects always ranked at the top. So it has accumulated effects that the Parks and Recs projects that got neglected over the years because it doesn't really flow to the top. So in this particular year, the council is going in a different direction, say, okay, we understand the situation and we want to allocate $200,000 for the Parks and Recs, and have the Recreation and Parks Commission to come up with, prioritize a project. One is for, the short-term goal is what to do with this 200,000. But in the long run, what we have in mind, Public Works and the staff and the Parks and Recs, we want to create a long-term capital improvement project list. So that way, instead of looking at it only at a single year, we're looking at 2 years or 3 years or even 5 years on the horizon, and we can determine what project fits in what year, have a more better long-term vision of how we're gonna deliver the project. So the takeaway from today is very important is for the commissions to decide what the scoring criteria will be for the Parks and Rec. What really works for Parks and Recs under your understanding, your best understanding what would work. And what you have in front of you is the CPAC rating criteria. You can take away what works for you, and what you can, and delete what doesn't work for you, and add two elements that you think is very important to Parks and Rec, but does not really reflect in the scoring criteria. So once we have a ranking system, then you can run all the projects, so we know what to do in the short run and the long run. So that's really the goal today.
Okay. Questions for him?
Yeah, just want to make sure, you said that the discussion was we weren't getting to the, I forget what the word was you used, but the like twos. That the safety, the health, the higher level priorities, the must-dos, if you will,
Right.
were getting fundings, but the like-to-haves were falling off.
Yes.
And that's how the 200,000 was carved out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just sitting here, that gives me the impression that if we use these funds to just renovate all the toilets that are associated with rec and parks, we're probably off the mark. Is that fair?
That's where the
Right.
mission didn't make a decision.
No, yeah, and I'm going from the
Yes,
perspective,
correct.
if we spend 100% of that money on it, we're probably doing the wrong
Understand?
thing.
So
Yeah.
because you can look at the list and think, and you have to really think long run. Okay, some of this project is going to have a good chance to float to the top. Just like this year, the couple of Parks and Rec project that really got funded, Acacia Park and the Hockey Rink, and you that's why you could kind of keep that in mind when you rate this as well. So that's why it's very important. You could have a scoring criteria for that specifically if you want. So
No, I was trying to get the tone and flavor
Right.
for you.
but that's basically that's correct too. So that's
Yep, appreciate that.
Yep.
So Meredith, as I look at this a little bit more, I think I've talked to you this about before. This is like a tool that you have. It's your departments. Here are our priorities, and they will go as the rankings may change during the middle of the year because of different facts may come to light. A project that was estimated to be a little bit less important, God forbid you find mold or something, and then that would elevate it in safety. But it's your tool to communicate within the department and into the city council and the city manager. Here's the priorities, and then the funding aspect. Looks like you've got two opportunities, two different ways. It could come directly through capital funding, or it could come through a different initiative. Heck, you find grants all the time, so there may be some other things in there that fit within a grant, and that suddenly becomes, okay, we're going to target this avenue to get it. So I think if you can mold the tool in that type and shape it that way, it'll become more powerful for you.
Right. And speaking of grants, I think it's this will help us. Sometimes we might get notified from LA County. That's usually the granting agency. We have $150,000 that can be allocated to your city if you submit a project and if you can complete it by this date. So to have this at the ready will be really helpful for opportunities like that are, needing to be almost turnkey and ready to go, that we've already identified. We've already, discussed this. It's already quote unquote approved. And, we'll know that it's something that we can go for.
Go ahead.
I think that a rating criteria is important. My suggestion would be to take this rating criteria and change the categories to be more reflective of recreation and parks, right? Because some of these are not recreation park related. So we keep the format or something close and just change it up, because I think, like I said, the process and to put a number on it is important. Otherwise, we just have a list of A's and B's, and then it's hard to among those. So that's my suggestion. Now, I don't know in this short time period which ones need to go away and whether they should be 10-5-3-1 or 4-2-1 or whatever.
I'd recommend we take that one outside, and I think Meredith was hinting at maybe have a subgroup work on that. The one thing I would caution, though, is with the scoring, it helps you sort out what's really at the top of the list, and with as long a list as Meredith has, it probably helps sort the top, the middle, and the bottom from each other. They may not tell you the two that are sitting right next to each other, are they truly there? And then you may have one, I think there was one listed here with ADA that I know that Lee and I saw and said, in my experience, that may not be high enough up on the list relative to it. You know, at the city council, I don't think we want more of that. Push that down, and you adjust your list that way. So you're not a slave to the scoring, but it appreciates and helps you sort through.
My question on the ADA, and I when we did walk some of the buildings, I said, really, is the ADA stuff, items need to come out of Recreation and Parks, or does it have to come out of the Public Works or the other funding? And why is, if it truly is a problem, and I'll tell you it is, it should be higher on the list, but I'm not sure it's on our list. Is there any other thoughts?
I think that's a very good point. I think that through this, if it is prioritized and high on this list, what we can talk about is which ones on these lists do we send through that CPAC process during the budget process, and hope that they get funded that way.
So it sounds like we're working toward pulling everything Recreation and Park out of CPAC into a mini repack.
I'm not sure pulling it out of there.
I would say second opportunity. Second opportunity.
So all of the items that we're going to go through with this process will remain on CPAC.
I don't think
We
that's
don't-
a
we don't
good
know
hard, fast
yet.
rule either.
Yeah.
You know,
We
but
don't know
don't know,
yet.
okay.
I think what we'll
I like
see
rules.
through this is the ones that do come high priority. If we feel that those are on the boundary, or maybe they shouldn't come out of this specific funding, then we'll submit them to that process and hopefully get funding that way.
I mean,
Because-
you could potentially get to the bottom of something like saying, okay, here's one for a restroom. You want that in Rec and Parks, you want that in CPAC? And the answer may come back, I don't want to commit to that. So then you look at where all the lists shake out and you determine if
Or we split it, right? Or we split with Public Works or something. Anything can happen.
There's a lot of different things that could happen, but it would work up through the priority system.
Yeah, may I also want to give you a little bit of background. So through this process, if you rent the, you have your own ranking system and you will make a recommendation. What that does, if you're gonna, then you send it to the CPAC process. Now they have a better understanding of what the community wants. So in certain criteria, like for example, community interest, the CPAC committees may have different opinions on how to rank the community interest. But if it highly recommended by the Recreation Park Commission, then they understand there's a high community interest. So they will rank that particular category high. So it's important that you rank them even if you're going to submit them through CPAC, through that perspective.
And when does CPAC occur? When does that process take place?
We usually do it from May to July, but going forward, we want to make it more a year-round process because we want to look at not just 1 year. We want to create more of a 3-year or even longer vision. So the CPAC is we're probably gonna for next year. This fiscal year. We probably gonna look to start that a lot earlier, or like February or March.
But for this process, we're looking at process, and the council is asking for a ranked list from us, correct?
In the short run, for what to do
Short
with the 200,000.
And that came about because of the shade structure, is my understanding. They wanted to know if we agreed with that. Is that how this?
No, not necessarily. That kind of got kicked back because we've been talking about this process. So they wanted to make sure that was discussed at this level. Yeah, so they're asking for a recommendation from Recreation and Parks on what projects have been identified, how do they rank in priority, and then ultimately, how do you want to spend the $250,000 this year?
And I took
But
this to
it
be,
is
they're asking
something-
for us a new process.
Right.
How do we communicate? It's a kind of an extension of what we did in July. Was putting together what we thought what the accomplishments were and what the priorities are going forward. Now we're getting to an itemized list of activities that need to be taken care of, putting a budget up against them, and then racking and stacking them, to then help out with that. That's how I view it. And
Right, and it's important too I think this is a good time to do it, and probably have, I don't know, we can figure out a target date to get back in front of city council, but once we have that recommendation, then it still has to go to Public Works, and they have to work it into their plan, depending on the projects that were recommended. It could be 4 $50,000 projects, it could be one $200,000 project, you know, depending on how it shakes out. But Public Works most likely will have to administer most of the projects, so they have to work that into their coordinated work plan for the rest of the year. So the more swiftly we can work through the process, the better.
Yeah, I want to stress that because the key is we want to actually deliver the $200,000 project this fiscal year. So keep in mind, for Public Works project, we have to go through the bidding process, we have to go through the contract process. I mean, the whole reason that the soccer field was delayed for so long is not because of the construction, it's because the bidding process and the contract process, we have to have the paperwork in place before the construction starts. The construction itself is actually accelerated and was compressed. So just keep that in mind. The earlier we can make a decision on what to do with the 200,000, the better chance we can get those 200,000 accomplished before the next fiscal year. So what that does is the council members going to able to see what this commission has accomplished before they make a decision on the budget. So you can actually have something to show them instead of we are still going through the project. So that's something to keep in mind.
What is our timeline then? That we need to have this done and then rank the projects? I mean, is it right? Is it tonight? Is it January? Because I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah,
I want to use every penny.
Yeah, right. I think what's realistic, I mean, when looking at it, you know, if we go back and work as a smaller group on a ranking criteria system, come back to the commission as a whole at November's meeting, and then maybe make a final decision in December.
I think we can do that. What's everybody else think? Do you think we can?
The one thing that I'd like to see in our November meeting is a general dollar estimate for a lot of these items, because as much as I support the plunge, if we decide to put the plunge at the top of it, our budget, if we were to get it for the next 15 years, would be done on the plunge. And I would not want to see the restrooms at Jocelyn Center go untouched for 15 years because we put a single item at the top.
And I would argue that the plunge shouldn't even be part of our discussion. That's
And
too big of that.
But
That's
it sits
a
on
different.
here, and I want to use that as
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
and I would never advocate for
and
that.
I go a third way,
but-
which is the plunge consists of many little projects, and do they all need to be lumped up underneath one thing? So in addition to the dollar amounts, maybe a little more definition to understand the scope as to what's thought of with this. I mean, I know you're working in it every day, and I know that this has a laser for you, but for those of us who
Right.
come
and
around
some
every
of them
month.
are just concepts, really, to be, you know,
Yeah,
shade over playgrounds, you know,
yeah, that one's nice and easy. What do you
conceptually
think? Yeah,
thinking. And but regarding the plunge, I think that, you know, if it is number one, or if something
No.
on here is number 1 or 2 or 3
No.
that are beyond $200,000 this year, obviously you're probably going to go to number 4 and 5 and 6 so that we can accomplish things.
And part of
but
my
what
point-
that does is show that the plunge is number 1. You know.
Part of my
If-
point is I would rather see 10 of these items done rather than one, regardless
Sure.
of what that one is. And when I look at Clubhouse, I see 4 different things. I would think from an efficiency scale, we do it all at once and we have it combined into something. So maybe we allocate a portion of our budget towards that and see if CPAC or somebody else doesn't say, okay, well, that's important to them, but they're not going to spend their entire budget on that one item. But that's,
and I would think we navigate our way through that in this preparatory,
Right.
right? Get a couple of commissioners
And that's-
offline, work with Meredith and the staff.
but if we're
and
going
then-
to do it in the next 2 meetings, it's a challenge.
We need to get going.
Mhm.
So it sounds like we want to get a small group of what's 2, I guess, all we can, with Meredith. Is that correct? That's the plan? And to get together and develop or at least start to put together a rating sheet or a rating criteria.
So would it be the subcommittee's task also prior to the next meeting to use that rating criteria and rate these and bring everything back in November? That's a lot.
I don't know that part can be done. I think the rating criteria should be first brought back, and maybe by looking at that, you'll have rating criteria or anticipated rating criteria, whatever it is, about 5 days before the meeting.
Like a preliminary, if we used this
If we
rating
use
system,
it,
this
if
is how it would shake
Then
out.
you'll be able to see, or you have these projects, you already know what they are.
Yeah, I think we can get more done than that. I think it's a meeting to get the criterion kind of done out. The staff will be putting together some of these definitions to
Right.
help with that, and the dollar amounts will be there. And by the way, the dollar amounts will not even have to be firm. In the program offices I worked in, we qualify what the number is. You know, some of these are just a guess by the staff. Some of them are a firm bid. Others is based upon having discussions in industry and figuring out what's out there and available. So there's this whole range of quality that you can put on what the number is and how good and what confidence you've got with it.
But we should be doing that at this meeting,
Well, I think
because we don't know if everyone's going to approve the rating criteria that we come up with.
well, that's a good point. Is there a way to work that sooner rather than later? Because the fiscal year ends when? Is it in July,
It ends in September.
September?
September,
And-
but keep in mind the budget really discussion start in July.
No, I
and
appreciate
August.
the discussion start then. It will be way ahead of that to work in the conversation, but the question is, will you get any projects going? In the federal government, funds expire on September 30th, and you can't obligate them at that point in time. Then you have to expend them, which has more time on top of that. I don't know if the city operates under something like that. So do we have to have a project under contract before the end of the fiscal year to reserve it? And then it expends out whenever it spends out, right?
Right.
Okay.
No, but you could choose administratively to carry the 200,000 over to the next year. Like, let's say our project was a $400,000 project, and we said no, we want to push hard for an extra 200, and because that's our huge priority. I think that would be.
Does it-
It's not like that. It doesn't.
I don't know.
No, this 200,000 is in the coffers.
It doesn't work that way in the federal government.
Yeah,
That's all I,
No,
So,
this is.
the 200 from the general fund does carry over from
carry
year to year.
forward projects and budget
Okay.
in order to do
No,
so.
it's okay. My
But
experience
the
is
goal
different
is
world with
though,
government.
if the council actually sees something done before they decide what to do with next year's budget,
Yeah.
you could get more money. It's possible. I mean, it's just
Yeah, that's the,
that's that's what you have to keep in mind. So if they say, okay, well, this process really works, let's put more money in it, or okay, instead of waiting the projects in the pipeline. So you know what I mean. So it's easier for them to see something accomplished and make a decision on what to do.
yeah, what your words coming across to me is we're starting a process late, and to help us out, you're going to accelerate the process and start it earlier. So
Yeah.
we'll just have to work through that.
We're going to pick all $14,500 projects. All of them are going to be under the bid limit. Do anything.
So
When we get a 30-sided die and whatever number comes up.
So one thing that I think we should decide before the subcommittee meets is, and maybe you can tell us how CPAC works. Does each member of CPAC have their own sheet and do their own ranking, and then it's all compiled to a mean?
Well, for the CPAC committee, it's a little different. I'm not sure it's going to work here. They actually do the ranking and discussion as a group together, but that requires basically all of the CPAC committee committed to a certain time. So it's basically a 3-4 hour process at a time, and it takes however many light it is to run through the project. So it could be a little bit hard to pull off with the group to do it that way.
Will they do it?
That's on how your
Do they
time
do it in a
commitment.
formal meeting with public attendance? Or is it a?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but you don't need to do it that way. You could score on your own, and then you can discuss at a meeting.
And then arrive at
It's
a
really,
unified rating.
yeah, it really would work for this commission.
that's what I was getting at. If we can come up with a rating criteria, an anticipated or projected one, get that out with the projects within our packet for the next month, get it ready for that. Score them yourselves before we get here. And then if we approve or like what the
Scoring system.
small group came up with, we say, okay, now how did you rank them? And we possibly could come up with an answer by next meeting. Thoughts?
So you want to have, which I'm fine with, we potentially will have a on the mic discussion about trying to, if we do it like CPAC, if we've all ranked individually, but we still have to come up with a ranking, arguing it out up here and saying, I disagree, that shouldn't be number 2, that should be moved down. That's a want, not a need.
I believe that's.
I hope we're talking about saying that.
I hope we're, yeah, I can too, but I hope we're talking about the scoring first,
Yeah.
and then we look at what the list results with, and then we have your conversation.
Right.
That doesn't
But
really
the,
look like it to me.
but the scoring is,
Because
Hopefully we could score them the
I
same
hear
way.
what you're saying, but if we,
I-
this could go three
Yes.
meetings down the road, and I don't know that,
Let me add something.
Please.
So, the nature of this commission is a little different than the CPAC committee. The CPAC committee, that's the only thing they do. But in this commission, you have all these other business. You got to take that into consideration as well. So,
that's true, but right now, this is important, and we don't have a whole lot on our plate, okay? So this is something this is nice to have on our plate.
The other part is your list of 38 came with time, right? This is probably reflects 2 to 3 years minimum of effort, right? That you've been working on.
Yeah.
We're starting from scratch, and the best thing I see is that I've got 44 items listed in front of us that we can get through. And maybe, relative to where we're at, we can identify what we think the higher priority ones are at November.
Right.
So we can put several up to the top, and if we have to have a conversation on only those, we'll have weeded them out at least that way. And if we have follow-on meetings where we can sort them even greater, work at it from there.
so should we all agree then, if we're going to do that, that cost should not be a consideration when we're doing the rankings? It should be, because, I might do my workbook at home and know that that's not going to, I'm not going to rank the plunge high, but like you're saying, if we rank the plunge high, but then don't fund it with our money, it stays high on our list. So there's still,
That's why I
Value.
said don't get married to your numbers, either your cost
Yeah,
or your.
so
You've
don't
gotta find a
consider,
balance.
so don't consider cost then when we're ranking.
Well, I've always gone with the approach that the dollar amount stands for itself. You can already quantize that and look at it, right? Something that's $3.5 million as compared to something that's $15,000, they kind of self-sort themselves. The real thing is trying to sort through those $75,000 projects.
And so we may end up with a list that we choose in the end to fund number 6 and 11, right? Of our 1 through 40. We may, based on a bunch of other stuff. It's possible.
We'll have a couple of
okay.
different elements of decision criteria, which
Right.
is what we think the importance or the scoring of the project is for our criteria and the dollar amount. And then you have to map it with how our funds made available.
Our
As we're
ranking
talking about
is
the
a-
plunge, I think you were probably going along the line of if the plunge is a large enough of a project, it may need to be brought about to city council all by itself as its own special project, if you will. Kind of like where campus kind of unfolded, the way that the new aquatic center has unfolded.
So this ranking that CPAC does doesn't commit them to anything. This is a
correct.
guidance document.
You're completely free to make your own criteria. So I want to add one thing to the discussion in terms of cost, though. So some of the items, if you see you rank them high, but the dollar amount is so large, what you can do is also you can recommend to the city council each year set aside certain amount, and then fund it that way. So it's a good example is fire station number 2. It was built that way. So the process starts decades ago when it was recommended to the city council, okay, this is really important, but it's so costly. Let's set aside money every year. And then when it accumulates to a certain point, and the council decided, okay, we're gonna put additional money and make it happen. So that's, that's why that's why it's a very good suggestion that you may not look at the dollar amount, but then you can also make a decision on what to do with it as well.
We need a group of 2. I'm really interested in doing that, unless somebody has got other thoughts there.
I'm willing to allow myself to be removed from consideration, knowing that I'll tear apart whatever's done anyway.
And that's why I want to do it, so you can tear it apart.
So whatever. You want me to do it at the beginning or the end?
Hey, I'm good to start.
I'd be willing to support the group because I've done this a number of times throughout the last 30 years with projects and programs I've been involved with.
You mean you're throwing your name into the hat? You want to
throw
be
my
in
name
it?
in the hat with Bob as being
All right.
in
How
person.
about the 2 of you?
Lee,
Have-
Alex, I mean, it's,
You want to do it too?
I'd be more than happy to, but I think your background and your knowledge probably puts you at the lead. So I like the 2 nominees.
Alex?
Happy with the 2 nominees.
There you
That
go.
easy.
Perfect. If I want to add something as well, on the list, the CPAC list, number 11, golf course lighting. This item was in relation to the Top Golf project.
Okay.
And there was a $400,000 contribution that would be coming from Top Golf, and the city council allocated an additional $200,000, anticipating that the $400,000 wasn't going to be enough to light the golf course. Last night at the city council meeting, there was discussion about this $200,000 that had been allocated now that Top Golf project is not moving forward, and what to do with that $200,000. They did not land on a specific answer, but there are some council members who have expressed support for adding that $200,000 to Recreation and Parks project. So just keep that in mind, that our original $200,000 may grow depending on how the list comes out and what it looks like, and that may have some influence over this sort of parking lotted $200,000 from the golf course lighting.
So how do we lobby for that money?
Good question. I think through the process, when we go back to city council and make that recommendation, would be the opportunity to do that. The other side of the coin on that conversation is the golf course does need some renovations, and they are in discussions about putting out an RFP or defining what could or should happen at the golf course. And I think that they're still weighing those options, and so there are a couple city council members who's also expressed, let's hold off on allocating that $200,000 because we may need it for the golf course. So just keep that in mind, that there is that $200,000. Golf course obviously is a recreation and parks facility, so either way, it's a win-win. But as we go through the process and make the recommendation to city council, it could be an opportunity to use some of those funds as well.
Okay. So we have taken care of that.
I think we should probably, just for the record, have a motion
We'll have a
on
motion.
creating the subcommittee and the nominees.
Go ahead. Who would like to do that? Go ahead, Lee.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve both persons to the council of the subcommittee for the prioritization of funds for different projects.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the names were Bob and Rick, right?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you.
And Meredith, you'll set up something and we'll figure it out.
Yes.
We're moving on to number 2, consideration and possible action to recommend City Council approve the funds and award the contract to complete the replacement of the picnic shelter at Recreation Park. The recommendations are recommend City Council approve the funds and award the contract to complete the replacement of the picnic shelter at Recreation Park, and/or alternatively discuss and take other action related to this item. Meredith.
Yes, thank you. So you have some background information in the report in front of you. This item, the picnic shelter that we're referring to is next to tennis court number 3 at Recreation Park. It is our only covered picnic area in the city. It is from the 1970s, and it is in disrepair. About 2 years ago, the current Public Works Director and I talked about how to spend some funds that were left over in the Public Works maintenance budget, and this item came up. So we started working down the process. It's taken a little while over the time. Costs have escalated. The scope of the project grew a little bit. And so where we were at is in October, back in July, we went out to bid for the project with the assistance of Public Works, one of the engineers who was project manager. We got the bids back in August. It came back at $86,000 and $137,000. So the low bid is $86,600. So we were left with trying to find some additional funds. We've worked through that with Public Works. We have $30,000 of a balance in one of our grants from Los Angeles County that we've been trying to spend, but $30,000 hasn't been able to be enough to complete a full project. So we thought that this would be a good way to supplement this overage. And Public Works has also agreed to fund the overage from the original estimate. So we've worked out the finances, and we went to City Council to award the bid. And because we've been talking a lot about capital projects and allocating and prioritizing, they wanted to make sure that this commission and that this body had weighed in on this project and were in agreement that this was of high priority. This is not included in the $200,000 that we were just talking about. This is actually funds that will get replenished into our fiscal year from cost savings from the fiscal year that just ended, basically. So with that being said, I think that council's just looking for reassurance that you have looked at the project, that you are aware of the project. I know that it was mentioned, I think, in the summertime during one of my director reports, and it's also been listed in writing in my director reports for some time. And I know that Bob made a special trip out to take a look at it in person as well. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on it and ultimately receive your support to go back to City Council and let them know that you're in support of the project.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'd be curious to hear I've looked at it myself, but not with this lens. Yeah, with this lens, like I've noticed that it's in disrepair just in passing, just because I'm there all the time, but I've never looked as a commissioner, inspected. Would you mind giving your opinion of the condition? And
It's definitely in disrepair. There's broken, the top is broken in many spots. It's an eyesore. So go ahead.
Well, I guess to Rick's point earlier, I don't think we want to stop anything that's this far down the road. So that's not my goal in what I'm about to say at all. But I do want to make sure that council gets what they're asking for, which is if this were on the list for the 200,000, where would it land? Obviously, years ago, it landed high enough that you were doing this. So I guess I want to hear that if we were sitting in a room doing a CPAC type priority thing, you'd be sitting there saying, you guys, this thing is terrible. And that's why you're recommending that we approve this. Is that staff? I mean, you've already recommended to do it, but is that your thinking? And it's a safety issue. It's an eyesore, and it would be up here.
Right. It's exactly those things. I think that it doesn't serve its purpose anymore. I think it is an eyesore. It's an aesthetic thing, but really it is also a safety thing. I mean, there's broken glass at the top. We don't know when, if and when it's going to fall, or kids are still throwing things at it. But I think it would make a really big impact on Recreation Park.
So I do have to admit, it wasn't on my radar through the summer. The costs with it, I mean, $86,000 for a structure like that I mean, it's a roof with 6 posts. Are we doing rework on concrete? We're adding power to the station that wasn't there before?
There's power there.
Okay.
There is power there, but I do think they have to reroute it because the posts will be in different locations than the existing posts.
And we will have to have concrete work?
Yes.
Okay. So and obviously, folks have reviewed the bid, right? The city staff
Yeah,
has
I
done
think-
that, and, okay. Those are my questions, thanks.
Anything else? All right, well, we need to approve it, so I recommend approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Get it back to council. Okay, thank you. We are to reports. Reports of subcommittees. Aquatic Subcommittee. Anything?
We have not met. There are still a lot of talk between the El Segundo School Board, which I think Meredith will mention. The joint use agreement on all parts, it needs to be finalized still. And I believe that their staff is currently drawing up job description for the supervisor, which I'm sure is in Meredith's report. So it sounds like it's all there on Meredith. So that's about all I have. I would recommend that hopefully we get together as a committee again in the near future.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Golf Course Subcommittee. Anything?
During the last meeting, they discussed Topgolf not going through, and subsequently they discussed short-term and long-term goals to raise funds to fix the golf course because it's in bad shape. Some of the things thrown around were a joint agreement with Manhattan Beach, correct?
Right, in relation to the high school team
Yes.
using the facility.
I think that was it.
Question for you. Is there a philosophy or a view going forward of what we're trying to achieve with the golf course? I know some folks are looking at it, it was the Topgolf opportunity, would reduce the amount of financial commitment that the city itself would have to make. If I understand the numbers right, there's a few $100,000 a year of taxpayer money that's spent going into the facility. We don't recover all the expenses through that. So my question is, has any philosophy come about relative to that? Did you guys discuss
There
that?
had not, to the best of my knowledge. I know they did discuss creating another subcommittee to the subcommittee, which would go over the goals and the vision going forward.
Thanks.
Meredith, did you want to
Sure, I'll
Well,
add some to that.
add something? Help maybe help Rick out here and see if,
I think that's what we're trying to figure out is what are those goals and what is that vision? There are differing opinions, and I think that that's why Topgolf ultimately did not go through, and also why there's been so much time spent on it because there are differing opinions. And at the council meeting last night, they did discuss how to move through the process of drafting an RFP for that location. And that could range anything from just restructuring the current management contract and keeping the golf course and driving range and the clubhouse as it is, maybe retooling the restaurant, but basically maintaining it as it is, but managing it a little bit different, to anything that would be more open-ended, that maintained the integrity of the deed restriction from Chevron, which is open space and outdoor public recreation. And, you know, the golf course right now is an enterprise fund, and obviously the intention is that it's self-sustaining, including setting aside money for capital improvements, and we know that it's not doing that. On the flip side, it's a recreation and parks facility, and some members of the city council and the community believe that it shouldn't have that financial performance expectation. And if the city ultimately decides that that's something that they want to change the financial model of it, then it probably leaves it a little bit more open-ended. So
So let me, so as as part of the enterprise funds, that bottom line is to try to break even and generate enough revenue to actually invest, right? Whereas with campus, it wasn't, the philosophy is not that way with that facility. And I could go down the line of all of our facilities. So that's why I asked if a goal had been expressed, because I don't know where you go if you are saying that it's an important enough resource to the city that we want to spend money on it and that we will invest in that facility, as opposed to we expect it to be self-sustaining.
right.
So
What
but
came out of last night's meeting is that the city council would like a task force to be created to define what those goals be, and Recreation and Parks Commission would have a representative or two on that task force.
So in the meantime, we're rolling through a fiscal year. We're probably have projections on the same that we've had in previous fiscal years about where we'll end up on the numbers, which is will probably be in the red. No guidance relative from the city council or the city manager to you on objectives for fiscal year 17-18?
Well, what we've talked about at the golf course subcommittee are those short-term things that we can address, such as fees. Let's take a look at benchmarking the fees. How much are we charging for buckets of balls, rounds of golf? Are we comparable? And is there some room to increase revenue in that way? We'll take a look at the programs. If there's any innovative or creative programming expansion opportunities, increase revenue. Those are the types of short-term things that we'll be looking at.
What's the ability of Recreation and Parks to act on that, as opposed to having to go back for a review to either the commission or to the city council?
For fees, any fee increases would need to be approved by city council and recommended by the golf course subcommittee. Probably come through this body as well, would be the most appropriate action. As far as programming, that's more of a day-to-day thing that, me and my team can work with the golf management company and
Right, but anything that establishes fees and collects fees has to be approved
yes.
upwards.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're not getting anything done in 2017-18. You don't need to respond to me. That's how I'm reading our cards right now. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Youth Sports Council.
Well, the Youth Sports Council usually convenes in August and January, and we're in an off month. But Meredith, with emails that she was having with some of the folks that are users out at campus, I think we're going to have another purpose with that group, is to try and establish ways to protect that resource. So I think it's based upon things that we were told, I think, 10 years ago, coupled with our experiences and some youth groups with working with other cities and seeing how they take care of their fields and how they go to maintain them for longer periods of time. So,
Can you remind me, is council allocating a certain amount of money in a separate fund for replacement now? And they're doing 100 a year?
Probably a little more. Yeah. I mean, what we discussed at this commission is what I'm recommending to the finances to make the anticipated life cycle 8 years and not 10. We'll take a look at the project where we ended up. It was about a $1.1 million project. Hopefully add a little escalation factor into that over 8-year period.
yeah, Meredith, my observation of other parks, but I don't know the complete utilization, is they seem like they're getting longer.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the Village Park in Manhattan Beach seemed to wear and tear about the same way. The parks in Westchester had that. The ones in Redondo Beach that are associated with their schools seem to be kept up a little bit better, but I don't think they have the traffic that our facility, Westchester and Village, have. So that if you've got counterparts there, you might be able to figure out what they're...
Right, and I think that's one consideration that we'll talk about in that task force and with the Youth Sports Council is is the heavy usage, and if there's something that we need to do there to reduce that.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to department staff reports. Racia?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I just have a few updates. We did have our volunteer recognition awards last night. It actually turned out very nicely. We had about 40, close to 40 volunteers come and accept their gift, and I had time to speak, which was an uncomfortable spot for me for a minute, but it was. It turned out very nice. They had a light meal out front, so Lee stopped through. Thank you. But we had a nice evening yesterday. And then the second thing I wanted to cheer about was last night our recreation management software got approved. Yay. So we're finally able to move forward on that. Tomorrow morning, Meredith and I will have our conference call with Civic Rec so we can further discuss what the next steps are for that. We also have a couple of positions coming up. I'm trying to continue to grow our recreation team. So we'll have a teen specialist position. We're having second interviews tomorrow. We pared it down to 4. Initially, we had 32 people apply for that position. So we definitely have interest with the city of El Segundo. Right now, next will be our marketing specialist position. And I think we had the same number around there, around close to 40. So we'll be interviewing for that too. Meredith already spoke about our rec supervisor position, and we're coming up with the job description for that. And we will have our recreation coordinator position. Well, it's already empty, so we will be trying to fill that as well. So we're growing by leaps and bounds, and pretty soon, we'll have the pool on board, so we're trying to prepare for that. And that's all I have.
Real quick, Arcia, you mentioned that the new program was approved last night. Was that the one that was approved by staff, or recommended by staff, I should say, and then approved by the council?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Because I know there's some discrepancy between the two and different members of the community. Okay. Thank you.
And how's the drama program coming along?
It is coming. We do have a performance, I believe, coming up, and so it's coming along nicely. They are having a new manager right now, so they're going through some growing pains a little bit. When new management comes in, then you have a change, but they're on their way to doing their performance and working on December's as well.
Okay, thank you.
Let me ask you a
Go
question.
ahead, please, go ahead.
Arcia, does campus fall underneath you in the structure?
It's starting to, yes. I'm getting familiar with it.
Well, let me make the general comment, which is, we track the number of folks from the aquatics program and everything else. It'd probably be good to report on a monthly basis what we're getting for traffic through campus if we're still counting or still making estimates.
Yes, I agree.
And do we do the same thing for the golf course? Does that fall somewhere else under this? Or
We can definitely report that. I think that's a great idea, and
Uh-huh.
to have our general manager come by every now and then and provide a report. We can do that.
Yeah, monthly numbers, since the numbers can't move without commission and council approvals.
Right.
We should have the information set in front of us, I think.
Good point.
Scott used to show up about every once a quarter, so maybe he can come back and say hello. Here, we're going to Joseph Casillas.
Good evening, Commission. Projects and improvements going on at Recreation Park. New infield irrigation system has been installed at George Brett Little League Field. That was provided by the Parks Department. New sod that was installed today on Little League, and that was provided by El Segundo Little League. New batting cage netting has arrived, donated by Babe Ruth and President Bob Moda, and will be installed by park staff towards the end of this week. Meredith already covered new plant material that was installed at Campus El Segundo. And going over to the tree report, The city tree division has completed the tree trimming on Main Street from El Segundo Boulevard to Mariposa. As you can see, if you go up and down Main, all the trees have been trimmed, and along Grand too. Freedom Park tree trimming has been completed along the back row, along that the fence line of the homes separating the parks. So that's been all complete. And that's about it. Questions?
No, I'd just like to add something to your project and improvement. That batting cage net was jointly purchased by Babe Ruth Baseball and girls softball.
Oh, okay, girls.
So I want to make sure girls softball got there. When we work together, things are very nice, and we're doing a good job out there.
And we'll
Thank you.
also be installing new lighting going to the batting cage. Be adding some more lighting, and that's towards the end of this month.
Go ahead.
That's the batting cage down by softball and Babe Ruth.
Yes, right next to Joslin Center.
And was there any consideration adding lighting to the Little League batting cage?
They're presently already added more lighting.
Oh, really?
In the works. Yes.
Oh, cool.
And they also last week installed a storage facility in back of the cages too, Little
Great.
League. That was a go.
My other question was, did the city decide to purchase the maintenance plan for Campus El Segundo turf, or are we doing that internally? You know, they come by 2 times a year and do the brushing and fluffing and throwing in new pallets. Yeah, is that, or are we doing that internally? Because that's
We are doing that internally with the park staff and recreation staff weekly as needed with the pallets. So
Really?
we'll always be sweeping it once a week, but as we get low spots, we'll be adding more rubber pallets.
and so how often? So that's what was already going on on the previous field weekly. That was already, or that's the
That-
new plan.
That's the new plan.
Oh, okay.
That's the new game plan.
Got it. Awesome.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Won't forget this week, Dan O'Toole.
Good evening, Commission. You have my report in front of you. I just wanted to say that we covered the volunteers that were out here yesterday before City Council in their picture. I believe you'll probably see it in the Herald. Also, the new fiscal year is upon us, and we're really looking forward to the holiday season, which rolls up on us very fast. And speaking of drama, we just did a site survey with the new manager there, and we're making suggestions on how to get a little better audio and stuff inside a giant brick building. So, and they seem very flexible with us, so we're looking forward to that performance next weekend.
Anything you can do with the volume for us guys that can't hear, I appreciate it.
We'll try to wave our magic wand.
Thank you. Okay. Department Directors Report. Meredith.
I believe we've touched on
I-
everything that I wanted to highlight tonight. Just to sort of recap, a couple coming items will be, like I mentioned, a couple task force coming up. One for the lakes, defining the RFP scope or what the community goals might be, talking about that. And another one for Campus El Segundo,
Okay.
reviewing the rules and policies and how we're communicating those. So don't be surprised if I reach out via email, either between now and the next meeting, or we discuss it at the next meeting on how to best have this group representing on both of those task force.
Okay.
And I wanted to congratulate everybody and thank everybody for such a great event last Saturday, the Celebrate event. I hope that you were able to see it. Jeff Kaysen really did a phenomenal job in imagining sort of the history of El Segundo through the fireworks and the projection and the animation and the lighting, and everybody out there just couldn't stop raving about it. So if you didn't see it, we will be producing a DVD recording of the show, and we'll be getting that out to the community for them to enjoy. And didn't want to forget that the Halloween Frolic is coming up. It's on Halloween. It's on Tuesday, the 31st. So keep an eye out for that on Main Street from 4 to 7 p.m. And lastly, wanted to update everybody on the latest announcement. And Sean Green and his wife did welcome a baby girl a couple weeks ago. And they are doing well. And I expect to see Sean back at work next week, I believe. So we will get some more information how everything's going there. But congratulations to them.
Absolutely. I was hoping that was going to be one of your announcements. And little girl's name, do we know?
Her name is Scarlett Linda.
Okay. And congratulations. Anybody? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm burning.
Don't be sorry.
I did forget about the mural. So if you have a chance to go over there, she has started and pretty much she's halfway done and it looks very nice. So please get a chance to stop by and look at it.
Anybody have anything for Meredith? Okay, thank you. Commissioner comments, Commissioner Farfan.
Not just thank you to Miss Allison from the Tree Musketeers Next Generation. Hopefully she gets the volunteers she needs.
Okay, Commissioner Pierce.
Well, I've had the opportunity to go out and use campus. AYSO suckered me into being an assistant coach. The fields look great. And the people are appreciative. I've seen that in the parents that on my team as well as other folks when I pass by them. So we're definitely looking forward to years of use out of that. It's as nice and shiny as it was when it was brand new in 2007. I think we used all the same type of patterns. Just like you said, the field lines are different. Great summer by everybody. I wasn't here in September, but we had lots of good programs going on. We worked through some availability issues with different resources that we have, but we still pulled off a great year from all the feedback I've seen. So great job to everyone there. And look forward to the events coming up here in October.
Okay, Commissioner Lubes.
Was an amazing public speaker. I mean, Tree Musketeers is an awesome program and everything, but I think one of the coolest things about them is they get these opportunities. I mean, that was better than most adults by far. That was awesome. Great job, Allison. Number two is I'd like to make a request that if Bob and if you guys go with Meredith on any field trips related to the facilities, that you let us know, just so that I can have the same lens. You know, I'll go visit them on my own. Just so if you go, you know, we went and looked at the bathrooms here, and here. Just send me send us a quick email, and maybe we could all just do it on our own. That'd be really helpful, if possible. And the Centennial Celebration. So I was there. I got to watch the fireworks. I watched from the backside though, because I was at home. I watched from home. But I was there during the festivities and the food and everything, and that part was pretty phenomenal too. I mean, there were so many people. It was packed. That was really cool. And then I had 3 people since Saturday tell me that was the best show that they've ever seen. 3 different people said that. And 2 of them didn't even know I was on the commission. They were just, oh, did you see that? So there's a really positive buzz. So congratulations to a lot of people.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chairperson Davis.
Yes, just want to thank staff for the volunteer reception yesterday. That was very nice. It's really pleasant to see City Council having bring us down, you know, kind of a budget and a priority list. I really do appreciate the fact that we can sit here and talk about stuff and actually see stuff being accomplished rather than seems like we're fighting fires. Now we can actually be a little bit more proactive and go after things as simple as a restroom or as complex as, you know, totally redoing the clubhouse, which I see on the top of the list. And I think that's, you know, a great opportunity for us to look at those priorities and not necessarily fight the fires that may come up in front of us. So thank you very much to the council as well as staff for giving us that opportunity. That's it.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I did start to look at some of the facilities in the park. They are as Meredith stated. Just if you walk into the Georgie Gordon Clubhouse and you look up and you look at the ceiling, and half the ceiling tiles, also a good portion of the ceiling tiles are not there. The bathrooms are old. There's paint that's needed. The flooring could be reworked. I'm trying to use polite words here. And yes, it does, there's some things that could be done inside of how it's set up and be more, help them work, have a better workplace. Went into Joslin Center. Actually, that's the nicer of the buildings I went in. Other than the bathroom, the toilets are a little low, and I can understand that something has to be done there, and it's something that should be done. Check out, they do a lot of the work themselves. It's not too bad, but they do a lot of the work themselves in there. And that's pretty much where we started, and I'll let you know more. The next one, I'm hoping that we can get into the teen center and this week, and I'll let you know more on that, what that looks like. Other than that, I think that's it. I would say that the celebration was very nice. Great job by Jeff, and it was very professional. So, other than that, we will move to public communications. Seeing none, we'll close public communications, and we will adjourn to the next regular meeting on Wednesday, November 15th at 6 p.m.